What's up, everybody? My name's Nick.
And my name is Sue.
And we're here to give you
a reality check.
Yes, you know you need one. Let's get into it. All right, everybody, welcome back. Survivor 48. I know you missed us. We took the last weekend off because it was a holiday. The Easter Bunny gave us a break, and we are here with a very special guest other than the lovely Miss Tsunami, who joins us every week. We are so grateful to have you back. We have Sue's number one ally from Survivor 47, her confidant, and her bestie for the restie, Gabe Ortis, with us in the studio today. Welcome, Gabe.
So happy to be here. I've been waiting for this invitation since 48 started, since I knew that Sue was on the show. I knew this day would come, and it's now a reality for me, a reality check, if you will. So happy to be here, and so happy to talk some Survivor.
Yeah, so excited. Thank you so much. We have been wanting to get you on the virtual couch since Survivor 47 started, but contracts, NDAs, all that good stuff, you know. But we're so excited to have you. And just right off the bat, what are you feeling? How are you feeling about Survivor 48?
It's interesting. It's been a season that I think will be defined, and I don't think that this is a hot take, but I think it'll be defined by the pre-merge and the post-merge. I think a lot of the main characters of the early days of this season are not in the game anymore. And it's very interesting when you see a season go like that, because we as audience members have to find new attachments for people that are going to be in the end of this game, and one of them obviously ultimately win this game. So I think that has kind of been the uniqueness of season 48 so far, that a lot of the people you got attached to early on in the game didn't make it to this merge point, to this jury stage of the game. So you had to rediscover who your favorites are and the people who you think could win on the fly. Where I think 47, a lot of the big personalities and big names that we had on our season from the beginning were people that were there late into the game. And I think that's usually how most of these seasons go. And 48 has proved to be a little countercultural in that way. And I've enjoyed it. It's been a whirlwind. It's been a little bit of whiplash from episode to episode, but that's why we tune in. And I think it's been awesome.
So Can I ask him a question?
Yeah, so you can do whatever you want.
Who were you like in the beginning then? Like, who was the big person when it first started that you were looking at that you really like now is no longer there?
I mean, I think the obvious answer for everyone is Smey. She took up a lot of air in the room early on in the season, and I think a lot of people thought that was because she was going to make a deep run, and she ended up being a bit more of a lone figure, of somebody who took up a lot of space early on, and ultimately ended up not, making it into the jury stage of the game, which I think most people would say is kind of the halfway point, whether that's true or not. Also, Thomas. I think Thomas was somebody that was, personally for me, a joy to watch. He was so good in confessionals. He was so good in his interpersonal relationships. And this was a guy who I was like, I could see him going and maybe winning this whole thing. And for him to get sent out as early as he did was like mind-blowing to me. So those are the two names that stick out to me the most, that I think were these huge bona fide fan favorites, and now find themselves, not in this portion of the game. Someone who's still in the game, who has clearly taken a step back in terms of their on-screen presence, I think, is Mary. Mary is somebody who is this other huge figure, the yin to save yang, and now we've gotten into this late portion of the game, and the last 3 episodes, her confessional count, not that this is everything, but it is an interesting measurement, was 0-1-0 for the last 3 episodes. So this is somebody who was a defining member, of the first 5 or 6 episodes of the season, and now we're all kind of wondering, where's Mary at? Yeah. And so I think, again, while she's still in the game, she plays in to this overarching theme that I'm getting at for season 48.
Yeah, it's interesting too, and that's why I'm really excited to talk to you, because Sue did give us like a little bit of a tease that you are loving and a fan of more of the statistical analysis when it comes to Survivor. Things like confessional counts and stuff like that is stuff that we don't necessarily, not that we don't get into it, but it's stuff that normally passes us by. I think on Reality Check specifically, we talk a lot about the production clues and like the interpersonal relationships, like you were saying. But I agree with you. We were just talking about how it was really strange how, even though Vula was the original tribe in the bottom the majority of the time pre-merge, so we had to see some of these relationships, that Say and Cedric were more of the focus, considering their elimination so early into the merged portion of the season. So I agree with you that I feel like we almost got some very unsatisfactory storyline endings. And it just, I don't know, something doesn't sit right with me. And with Mary specifically having a 010 confessional, when she was so involved, especially in these last 2 episodes, to push the vote with David, for her not to be involved in the confessionals when, I don't know, I felt like she was almost the puppeteer when it came to David's alliance this past 2 episodes was very interesting. And I'm curious to see, Kyle's been my number one since day one. Kyle and Thomas. Thomas was my number one.
Yeah.
Well, but it's interesting to see. I don't know what's going to happen now. It feels like as the viewer, anybody's up for grabs, you know?
Oh, yeah. And that is something that I think has made this season very captivating, is the fact that there has been this majority alliance, and it feels like anybody within it could go win right now. But we also know that Survivor loves its dark horses and the people who don't think are going to make it to the end, and they end up making it to the end. Maybe like a Star, maybe like a Mitch, or maybe a Camilla, who I think is a little more involved in this power group than a lot of people within it realize right now. But it's fun because it's like you can make a really fair case for just about anybody that's still left in the game that they could go and win. And you can have your personal favorites, and you can have people that you think have a better chance than maybe some of the other folks out there. But there's nobody who right now I'm writing off, and I'm like, there's no universe where they could ever possibly win. And those, I think, are the best kind of Survivor seasons, the ones where you don't hit this point in the game and you're like, well, it's going to be one of those 3, so let's just fast forward to the end and see what's going to happen. Like, it could go any way the next episode, it could go any way the episode after that, and the path that I have in my head for the rest of 48 could be proven totally wrong by the time that we get to late May. So, I mean, it's been a really fun, interesting, unique season to watch so far, particularly for the new era.
What are you thinking about all of the strength?
We're looking at this majority alliance, this group of people that have gotten together because they are strong competitors, you know?
Yeah.
I think it's interesting. I think a lot of people, a lot of the fans, particularly those online, have gotten, upset by it. Because it's like, well, strong people have been winning Survivor forever. So, like, what do they mean that they're all getting together? But, like, Survivor is a fluid thing, Survivor is something that changes over time. And you cannot say that since the new era has become a thing for the past 5 years now, that strong people have been winning this game. They haven't.
Right, I agree.
Largely very unassuming players. You had Erica in season 41, who was very unassuming over the course of her season, where many people who watched that season wonder, like, how did she even win based on what we got from the edit as an audience? 42 was Marianne, somebody who was incredibly unassuming over the course of her season, somebody who nobody thought had a shot until she went into Final Tribal and put on a great performance. Season 43, Gabe, some people may say that he was just the best of the rest, but I would also say that he was a very unassuming guy. He didn't get no votes cast against him over the course of that season for no reason. 44, you had Jam Jam. 45, you have Dee, who is probably the worst example for this point I'm trying to make. And 46, you have Kenzie, and 47, our season, you have Rachel. Like, all of these people are people that do not come in with loud personalities. They do not come in and, scream challenge beast when you first see them. And yet these kinds of people keep navigating their way to the end and keep getting votes to win the game. So if you're coming from this perspective of like, oh, well, strong people have always won Survivor, so what does this alliance even mean, which is an opinion I've seen very prevalent online, I would say that, like, okay, that was a thing years ago, but in recent history, that has not been the status quo. And whether you agree with it or not, I do applaud the attempt of the people currently in the game to reclaim that status. Because at the end of the day, if you're a David, if you're a Joe, if you're an Eva, if you're a Kyle, like, yeah, you're probably not going to win a New Era Survivor season until you all decide to come together and say that we're going to look out for each other. Yeah. So, like, this is a super valid strategy, and it is something, frankly, I think the game needs. I, as a fan, was getting kind of sick. Not sick, but just it was getting a little predictable to the point where I'm like, who's the most unassuming person that has their head on straight here? They're probably going to find their way to the final five and probably find their way to win. And now going into season 49, and obviously season 50 is going to be whatever that is, but going into these returning seasons, there seems to be a pathway for these strong, more alpha players to make it to the end and win now. Now, obviously, we don't know who's going to win out of these people, but they're making a pretty good run at it. Yeah. And I think it's going to set a good precedent for seasons moving forward that you can be this archetype of player and still have a pathway to the end, where I think that door has been closed for a few years now. And I'm glad that it's being reopened, not necessarily because I want to see people like that win, but because I want everybody to have a chance to win when they first come out. And I don't think that's been the case for the last few seasons, particularly in the new era of Survivor. So I'm happy these doors are being opened again for these kinds of players.
Yeah, I agree with you. We definitely have seen in the past few years more of the reserved types of people, the Charlies, the Rachels have really blossomed in the last few seasons. And I think that is made in part by production focusing more on the people side of Survivor than the Survivor side of Survivor. Because years ago, strength was really important. Survivor was more Survivor-y. You know, those bigger guys could last longer with less food because they had the muscle mass going in.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting to see, and I love that now the conversation is opened up. And I love that it's not just big men. Eva is included. Mary has now been roped into this big guy alliance. You know, so I love that it's not a gender thing. It's not a muscle thing. It's like more of a mentality.
Yeah.
A grit type of thing. So I'm excited to see more people in the future get excited now that there's that conversation.
And the fact that, you know, like you said, a big part of it was that Survivor was more Survivor. It was more physically taxing. And it's, me and Sue will tell you, it's still very, very, very taxing on your body and on your mind. But also they're casting so many big fans of the show now. And people who look at these archetypes, these more alpha archetypes, and they say, well, you know, I saw season 14, 15, 16, whatever, and like I know how much damage that these players can do and how, so we got to get them out right away, you know? So I think the fact that you now have people who are fighting back against that super fan mentality on the show is also a good thing. And I think for probably a few years, because they are alphas, these alpha mentality people, I don't think they're thinking this, but I think there probably is in the back of your head, like, I know everyone's going to come after me at some point, and I'm probably not going to have a lot of ways to get out of it. And now I hope that people who are more of these direct, take control, I want to win challenges, I want to be a provider around camp kind of players can say, like, I got as good of a shot as anybody. That to me is a good thing for the game. Whether you like those kinds of players or not, it's good for the storytelling. It's good for the integrity of the game. And I'm very happy to see it. Now, I'm curious what you guys think about how it's impacted this specific season. Some people think that it's been a little boring because you've had this group of 5 or 6 people that are calling all the shots. Some people think, that the personalities within that group are worth watching. I'm curious what your guys' take on the season is so far, and particularly the Majority Alliance.
Well, for me personally, I always like when Mary and Say were going at it. That was so entertaining. That was something that was to me, the real Survivor, the real, they're playing the game, they're thinking, and, it's nice to watch. To me, it's a little bit, not that it's boring because it's always exciting, but it's
lacking entertainment, I think. I think what you're looking is lacking that entertainment value.
Right. That drama. There's not a whole lot,
Yeah, the tea,
Yeah.
Eventually, they're going to have to start, going after each other. But this has been one whole group that's running the whole show. And then you've got, when Thomas was in, I was so excited to see what this man was going to do.
Yeah.
Mary and Say, they were another exciting duo that I was hoping they'd make it really far, because that to me was gameplay. And, Gabe, we've been there. We know what's going on and we know what it's like. And it's nice when you can all be sitting pretty and comfortable and sort of know that you're all good. we never really, we had that a little bit, but then we didn't, right?
Yeah.
It was an up, and I always feel like I shoot for the underdogs too. So, they've got this big muscle, strong alliance, which is great for them, but it really sucks for all the other ones that aren't there. So,
yeah. And I'm curious now that David has left, if the people who are on the outside of that, like the underdogs, the stragglers, if they're going to say like, well, all of a sudden one of the leaders of this alliance has been cast out, is there maybe more of a crack here than we thought? And if there is, can we exploit it? Because now
they have no choice but to try.
Exactly.
I was saying, right? Like, I'm looking for crap.
And I think that there's like two ways that it can go now, and it's either all those people can do exactly what we just said, and they're going to say, we all got to band together, they're weak, they're wounded right now, they don't know where the royalties lie anymore, now's the time to strike, or everybody could be fiending to take David's spot and be like, well, I want to be a part of that alliance now because you need a number. You guys just lost a number. Like, I'll be your new number. And while I don't think that would be as entertaining, I do think it is a pretty valid strategy if you're somebody like Mitch who doesn't really seem to have any allies right now, or you're somebody like Star who doesn't really seem to have any allies right now, to say like, getting to 6 and figuring out how I move further then is a lot better than going out at 8 tomorrow. So it's like it's a very interesting layout of the game to see how people are going to try to exploit the new openings that exist.
Well, all I know is, I'm sorry, Nick, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
No, I want to say is like, all I know is, I know with Tuku, I always knew like me and Caroline were on the bottom. And when you know that, and again, I knew we were good.
Yeah.
I know that the initial vision of what they were thinking was we were on the bottom.
Yeah.
You have to do all you can. You see this group together, and I know you went along with it in a way to just do what you had to do. Yeah. But in the same breath, when you're sitting at the bottom looking up and you see there's so much peace and like this, with the group, and they're so confident, it sucks.
Yeah.
It just sucks. And so, I'm hoping that between all of the people that aren't in this big, strong group, I always root for the underdog. So I'm hoping that they can somehow figure it out and just come together as a whole, because it would be amazing if they could do a comeback somehow and just get their feet into the door. Right now, I don't think they have a shot, if they don't make some big moves.
Because right now there's 8 left in the game, right? So you have Star, Mitch, Mary, and Camilla, who I would consider to be outside of that alliance, and then you have Joe, Eva, Kyle, and Shaheen, who are kind of in it. And so, like, it's going to take someone to rally the troops. It's going to take someone to say, like, hey, like, it is clear that this game has been set up for one of these 4 people to go win, and it's not really set up for us to win. So we have to do something here if any of us want to have a shot. Like, even if you don't trust me, you got no shot without me right now. And it's funny because that's the mentality that this majority alliance started out with, where they were all saying, we don't have a shot because we're such big threats unless we stick together. Now it's the underdogs who need to have that conversation with themselves and understand that's the position they're in. So it's like, I have this vision in my head of how I want it to go, and it's just a matter of if they'll execute or not.
If not, they're going to be picked off one by one.
One by one. And this is the last chance, because that 4-person that's left of Kyle, Joe, Eva, and Shaheen, if one of them doesn't go next episode, then they have the majority, and they can literally say, Mary, you go next, Mitch, you go next, and then the fire.
Unless, in true Survivor fashion, we have a lost vote next week. Because then everything is really going to change. With a journey, anything that could come up with a Survivor lost vote. We know that they love to do it in the new era. People, I feel like, can't vote more than they can vote sometimes in the new era of Survivor. So we'll see. It's definitely, there's a lot of pathways that this could go. There could be the resurgence of the Muscle Alliance, kind of the doubling down of like, look, we just had to get the moldy piece of bread out of the bag so we can eat the rest of the loaf.
Yeah.
Or it's going to be, we're going carb free and we're doing a whole new diet. So it's going to be interesting. But getting into this week's episode, we see this kind of like cult mentality almost. I've been calling it the milk cult because of all the milk talk with all this alliance. It's very like, David's very much this cult leader, you know, like he wants everybody to be skipping along in the prairies and, you know, just listening to what he wants to do. And it's kind of freaky. Like I really loved David in the beginning of the season personally. He aesthetically caught my attention, but then I really was enjoying his backstory. And now in this kind of like macho man way, this almost, I don't want to say toxic masculinity because he seems like a nice human being, but as a player, I would say that there's almost this like superiority complex of like my way or the highway that feels very demeaning to his fellow castaways. That's kind of putting me off as a viewer.
I think it was tough for him because he was right about all the concerns that he had.
Yes.
He was like, he had this great read of the game, but like Survivor, when it comes to the social game, and I guess the strategic game as well, you need to have a good macro view of what's going on, being how all the remaining people left in the game are connected and interacting with each other. But you also need to have a good micro view of these people as individuals and how to operate with these people, around these people, against these people. And if you have one and not the other, you can't execute on where you're hitting. So David is somebody who had this spot on macro view of the whole game. He knew all the secret alliances. He sniffed them all out. But he didn't have a good micro view of how to convince his fellow castaways of what was going on around him, despite the fact that he was right. Yeah. And I think you get an interesting dichotomy between a player who really struggled with that one-on-one individual reading a person and somebody who was really good at it in David and in Kyle. They both were going after the same person. They both needed to get Joe on their side for what they wanted to do. David wanted to get Camilla out. Kyle wanted to keep her. The way to achieve either of those goals was going through Joe so that you can get his vote and you can get Eva's vote and you have a locked-in majority. When David went to Joe, he did a very poor move, called out his integrity. This guy whose entire game, as we know maybe more than he does as audience members, was based around integrity, was based around protecting his people. In this case, Eva was based around being there to be a good example for his kids and all of his people back home, and he's a firefighter and all this and that. And for him to go up and be like, you went back on your word and I didn't appreciate that, even if you're right, and even if he did, that is never going to land well with this guy. Yeah. Never in the, because despite all those very positive traits, and this is an inherently negative trait, he's also a man's man, and he's going to stand up for himself, and he's going to put his guard up before he gets vulnerable, as a lot of grown men do. And for David to go up and be like, you went back on your word, did he expect Joe to be like, you're right, I messed up, David, and I'm sorry. How can I make it up to you? Of course that was never going to go well, and it was going to sour Joe on David. And then you see Kyle go up to Joe with the same goal in mind as getting his vote and then getting Eva's vote because of it. And he comes to him as a more vulnerable person who opens up to Joe about
the dad and him.
And exactly. And channels this patriarch figure that Joe sees himself as, and that really speaks to Joe. And while maybe he didn't need that to get Joe on his side, it left no doubt in Joe's mind of where he wanted to go next. And that was with Kyle, despite the fact that David was right. So it's like, you know, David, who had a really solid majority alliance that he was the figurehead of, had this great read of the game when his alliance was starting to go a way that he didn't like, didn't have that micro view of how do I get to just this one person, right? I have a good read of this group of 9, but now I need to lock into the intricacies of this one person. And that's where he failed, and it's where Kyle succeeded. And I think that, interestingly, Kyle is somebody whose major view of the game was a little askew, who was like, I have this secret group, I have this secret alliance with Camilla, nobody knows, it's going great, and at the end I'm going to pull like the ace out of my sleeve, and we're going to go to the end, and we're going to win together. And little did you know, people were a little more on his case than he thought. Yeah. And it manifested itself in David. And Mary was somebody who everyone doesn't really realize was the person who threw out Camilla's name first. And yet, and this is very savvy by Mary, David was her attack dog. And none of the heat of Camilla's name getting thrown out there fell back on Mary. It all fell on David, even though it wasn't even his idea. And so Kyle's read of the game as a whole was not nearly as on point as David was, but his view and understanding of Joe as a person is what allowed him to win this battle over David for the fate of Camilla. And you got to give Kyle his flowers for that. And it's something that I think is really going to carry through the rest of this game, or at least through the rest of Kyle's time here, is this connection that he had with Joe. There was a battle for Joe and Eva's vote, and Kyle won over David. And I don't think that's going to go away anytime soon. That bond, that loyalty they have between each other now.
Yeah, and that's what I find that I think it's interesting because I feel like Joe seems to be the common denominator. He's sort of like the king, right?
Yeah.
I feel like
he's always in that swing vote position somehow.
Well, and so this is something interesting about Joe, and that even though I think we're pretty different people, I think we found ourselves in a very similar position in the game. And it's not one that comes with a lot of strategy, but you are always in the center of what's happening. I call it this power broker role, where people know that you have votes behind you, and you have people who, when you go to them and you tell them how you want to vote, they listen. And for me, it was Caroline and Sue and Kyle, my whole Tuku alliance. And the tricky part about that role, though, is that once people start seeing you use your power and your influence for your own purposes and not theirs, then you're too dangerous to keep in the game. So, for instance, when we wanted to get Sierra out, Saul came up to me with the plan, and he knew that if he wanted to get the Tuku votes, I was the guy to come talk to. And everybody loved having Gabe around because it was, we can get 3 votes like that if we can convince Gabe on a plan. When Genevieve wanted to turn around and get Saul out, after Sue, I was the first person she came to because Genevieve knew it. She said in one of her confessionals, I need these 4 Tuku votes, and Gabe is the door to those votes. And I think people see Joe in the same way, where it's more just him and Eva, but sometimes 2 votes is all you really need. And it's tricky because then after Saul goes home is when I decided to pick my head up and say, guys, we got to get Genevieve out. She's made this huge move. She's so good. We got to get Genevieve out. And everyone was like, maybe Gabe having 3 votes behind him isn't actually such a good idea because now he's trying to throw his weight around, and that's scary and that's intimidating. And what if we just got him out now before he has a majority next week? And so Joe finds himself in a similar role, and people are saying, like, Joe's been very quiet. Joe's not very strategic. I think it's because he knows that he has a gateway to this extra vote through Eva and the plethora of advantages that she has too, where, that's kind of like, I maybe have more people behind me, but Joe's got Eva, who's got an idol, who's got safety without power, who's got everything under the sun that you can have in a Survivor game. And I think he knows that people are coming to him and saying, like, Joe, I want to do this tonight with the thought in mind of these advantages will fall my way if Joe's on my side, and I'll have a 2-for-1 vote with Joe through Eva if I can get him on my side. And it's a tough role to be in because if you're on Survivor, you want to do stuff. You want to come up with the plan. You want to decide who gets blindsided. But if you're a power broker, you don't want people to ever think that the power you have is going to be used against them. And it's a very difficult tightrope to walk. So I find Joe to be a very interesting character. I see a lot of my game in his, and I'm curious to see if he's ever going to wake up or if he's just going to kind of sit in that role until you blink and, we're making fire, or we're in the final 3. And it's going to be interesting. I'm sure he's got a few more challenge wins in him as well, especially now that David's gone. So I'm very curious to see how his game develops.
Yeah, Joe and Eva kind of remind me of you two on your season. Just like so undoubtedly locked in, and for whatever reason, the entire tribe was just fine with it.
Yeah, well, I think that we were a little bit of a mix of Kyle and Camilla and Joe and Eva. I'm curious to hear your perspective on this, Sue, because it wasn't until like right around when I went home that people realized just how close we were. Like, we kind of pulled a Kyle and Camilla where, like, nobody really knew that me and Sue were even a thing for quite a while. I mean, like, would you agree?
I 100% agree. I felt like nobody knew. They were always focused on me and Caroline.
Yeah.
they had no idea, in my opinion. They knew I wouldn't write your name down, and that's why they blindsided me as much as they blindsided you, because they knew there was no way, and I was always going to have your back. But they did not know how close we really were, and that I wanted to go, the three of us to the end, and they had no idea. You were my ride or die, and nobody knew that. And I do think we did keep it more. We weren't hanging out. We weren't announcing our relationship or
making bracelets for each other's family.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Where Joe and Eva are like at the most outed alliance in the history of the show. I mean, but in terms of the trust level, I never ever in 100 million years would have written Sue's name down, and she never would have written my name down, much like Joe and Eva are right now. Or I don't know, we haven't gotten anything to suggest otherwise, but maybe Kyle and Camilla could turn on each other if the situation was just right and presented itself, where I think Joe is at a place where he's like, I will sacrifice myself for Eva to go one round further in this game. I don't know if Kyle and Camilla are quite at that level, but I think that they have this very good working relationship where they're the next strongest duo.
And with you and I, I always knew you were playing the game. We'd see Gabe just all of a sudden running behind us in the woods. All over the place. He was playing hard. But my goal was to get to the end with him. And I mean, it was obvious he would have taken it. That's how good of a game he played. And I was okay with that because he earned it, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I wanted to go to the end with them, and I was okay. He played a much better game than I did, and I feel like that's how Joe is with Eva in a way, she's a beast and she's got her own thing going on. She's doing well. But in the same breath, I feel like I looked at Gabe the way he looks at Eva, where he's okay taking a step back from her.
Yeah. So that she can maximize all of her potential out there. I totally agree. I
feel like I don't know if it's our age or if it's our respect for the human that we're with, or our alliance is so strong that's okay for us to not win first place, to maybe get second or third, but go with that person, because that's like a dream come true. You start a game and you say, let's go to the end. Imagine
you do it. Exactly. Yeah. And it's also obviously only one person can win Survivor, but if you achieve that goal of making it to the end together and then one of you wins, that's the victory. There can only be one sole survivor, but that you've won the game. The game itself you've won.
Yeah.
Right. And now it's just we got to figure out who gets the grand prize. But it's you guys won. You beat everybody else there as a team. Now it's just we got to do this thing with the million.
They won.
Probably won, exactly, which is kind of what Joe and Eva had. Yeah. So that's a really good comparison, I think. I think Joe finds himself in a very similar position that you did, where, and I would just say the main difference is that Joe is the guy that a lot of people are coming to for what do you want to do, Joe? Or rather, would you do this with me, Joe? And Eva is kind of the one who's like, what are we doing? This is what we're doing? Okay, cool. And it's funny because I also see a lot of Caroline in Eva, because she had this whole thing in the last episode where she was trying to be this peacemaker. Yes. And she was trying to, why, these are all my friends, and why are my friends fighting? We've been doing so good since we hit the merge. Can't we just keep doing that? And I was having flashbacks when I was watching it, and it was getting under my skin because I adore Caroline so much. That's one of my homies. I love Caroline. But it was frustrating me so bad when me and Tiana were very openly going after each other, and Caroline kept saying, I'll just go talk to her, and I'll hash this out between you guys, and I'll talk to her, and we'll figure it out, and Tuku's strong, and we'll make this work. And I just remember being like, look, she don't want me in this game. I don't want her in this game.
Let it go.
Neither of us is going to change that. No. So you got to pick a side, And, we got to the point where we were forced to pick sides because Rachel gets up and leaves Tribal when Tiana goes home. And, thankfully for me, Caroline chose me over Tiana, me and Sue over Tiana, which was huge. But I just that role of peacemaker, it doesn't exist in Survivor, because so much of the game is just based off your gut and like how your gut feels and either acting on that or not. And when you get a feeling in your gut of like, I don't know about that person, that never goes away. There will never be a moment after you get that initial feeling, no matter what they do, if they vote for you, if they give you an idol, if they, or whatever happens, you will always have that feeling of like, I don't quite know about you. And the deeper you get in the game, the hungrier you get, the more stressed out you get, the closer to the million you get, those feelings all get more intense, you know? And so for somebody like Eva, it's like you just got to pick a side here. There is no bringing Kyle and David back together. They've been beefing for 2 straight days now, probably more than what we saw in the edit. And like you are not going to get these 2 alpha macho dudes to sit down and be like, let's bury the hatchet and keep it going. No, one of them has to go, and you need to decide which person you're going after, or rather, which person you're siding with.
Well, I do feel like David did seal his fate when he said, you know, you went back on your word.
Oh yeah.
Exactly what you just said. You know, someone gets under your skin, or that sticks with you. You know that totally influenced Joe to be like,
oh yeah.
And then Eva's going to go with him as well. You know,
yeah.
Any of that conversation, but you know, the second he said that, I'm like, he's done.
Yeah.
It's like when you're dating someone new, like Joe got the ick. It's
yeah.
So sad. He got icked out by David and was like, I'm gonna ghost you.
When you hear that one thing where you're like, I'll never marry this person, no matter if there's one sentence.
Yeah, that should have never been said. Something like out of his mouth towards Joe was the wrong thing. Like,
yeah, and I'm sure that, you know, like you said, Sue, there was probably a conversation that Joe had with Eva where he was like, I'm voting David, and she was like, why? And he says, you know, he called me out in a way that I didn't appreciate, and he's got to go home now. And imagine if David had played that better and Joe goes to Eva and says, you know, Joe might be onto something here with this Kyle Camilla Shaheen thing, and, you know, maybe we should listen to him. And that opportunity, I do think, was in front of David, and he just played it so bad on a personal level with Joe. And it's like, well, you know.
I think part of it could have worked. I do think that speaking to Joe's integrity as a man to man, could have worked.
Yeah.
If David had taken less of like the alpha position.
Yeah. Less of an aggressive role, you know?
Because he would feel like you did this instead of being like, I feel like we had something, you went back on it, on your work, and like kind of came at it in a more emotional, like,
or even, I'm really disappointed that this didn't work out the way I wanted to. Yeah. But like, we're past it. But like, is there a way that we can come back to that now? You know, but just being like, you screwed me is like, all right, I screwed you. I'll really screw you now. You're going home. Like, you know, I'll show you it's over. Like, you know, you thought I went back on my word. I'll show you going back on my word. Like, and a part of that is also, you know, David, they had this whole thing, Joe and David, where they were like, we're the Titans. We're going at each other. Like, that's why I want you in the game.
We drink milk.
That, like, if you're going to come after a Titan, he's going to come back at you twice as hard. You know, so I thought that even like the context that they established of their relationship should have lent itself towards David not saying something like that and being like, if I call this dude out right now, he's going to hit back twice as hard, just like he does in all these challenges that we're going after each other at. You know,
that's the problem too. Like we saw even with Kyle on our season, he was a challenge beast, right? And so like you have to realize we need to stop this.
Yeah.
And David and Joe neck and neck at all the challenges. Joe was smart enough to know too that if I've got to pick one, pick the guy that I want to stop having to compete so hard against.
Yeah.
The immunity necklace.
And that's never going to be hard to sell to everybody else. Like, oh, the dude that's built like Hercules is going to go home. Okay, maybe I can put on the necklace finally. Like, you know, that's the easiest vote of the season for me. Finally, this guy gets to go home. And that's nothing to do with his personality. I'm sure there were reasons for that too, but just from Sue's point of like the physical aspect, because like, I mean, I was lucky enough to wear the necklace. Sue was lucky enough to wear the necklace, but there are many people who go out there and are probably like, I'm never going to put it on, you know, and you just look at the field, and especially this season, and you're like, I'm definitely never going to put it on. And so when you can get somebody out who opens up the door for you to cross that off your bucket list and have the safety of, you know, being there the next day because you want to challenge, like That's very, very, very appetizing for a lot of people. And it's easy to tell why. It's like nobody wants to go into a challenge being like, well, I'll see how I'll do, but we're just going to wait for Joe or David to win. Like, you want to
try my best,
And that's the thing, Gabe, like you and I both know, winning that immunity necklace is such a big deal, right? For you personally, for me personally.
Yeah.
The fact that we wore that goddamn thing around our neck, we earned it. We did something that
hideous bat.
Hey now, I thought it was awesome. I love the bat.
I know.
Look, I love it. Looking back on it now, as a viewer, I'm like, okay, I will always remember.
It was iconic. Yeah, there you go. Exactly.
And, this season's I think it's partially blue. I will probably forget it by the time.
Exactly.
As much as in the moment, I was like, what the hell is that? Now looking back on it, I'm like, nobody else can say they had one like that.
Yeah, exactly.
There's only a few immunity necklaces that I can recall, and one of them is the big green jade one from I think Micronesia. I don't even know. Moving into the episode a little bit more, speaking of challenges, before we get to the immunity challenge, we see Eva and her night mission. This sneak away advantage and this kind of horror scene of Shaheen's silhouette watching her go. This was so freaky. The way they shot this, I was like, my heart was racing for her. They definitely got the reaction out of me that they wanted as a viewer for sure. But speaking to Joe's kind of relationships and dynamic that we were talking to a little bit earlier, even after Shaheen wakes him up, is like, oh, she'll tell me about it tomorrow. So I'm going back to bed. And it's interesting to see him in such a, Sue and I, we called it with Thomas, a post office player, because everybody drops off their information and then decides where it goes. And Joe was so chill about it, so relaxed. And it's just so interesting that their dynamic is so, it's I feel like what we are seeing as a viewer is real. Sometimes I feel like we get these storylines that it's presented a certain way and then it's not how they act, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I really do feel like these two individual human beings will be bonded for the rest of their lives.
Oh, yeah.
So it was interesting to see that. And then it was also interesting to see the actual advantage when she got there. So I'm interested to know what you guys would have done if this was your note that you unraveled, how you would have handled it. Would you have told anybody like Eva did? I'm really curious to know.
Well, the first off, the cinematography of this sequence was, like you said, it was outstanding. It felt like they got Stanley Kubrick to come in and direct this sequence.
Slenderman in the background.
Yeah, the silhouette of Shaheen in the background was a crazy shot. And then the transition from the infrared into color when Eva walked into the journey location or whatever you want to call it was awesome. The whole setup, yeah, and the whole set that they had for her to play that game looked super badass, and the frame that they had of her behind it, the whole 10 minutes, I was like, did they put $1 million into just this production in this 10-minute sequence? It was awesome. So it was super fun to watch. In terms of the game itself, I really liked the game. First off, I thought that the journey, again for lack of a better term, was actually pretty interesting, both from a gameplay perspective and just from a viewer perspective. I thought it was very interesting to think about. I thought it was very interesting to watch. What I was thinking is, what's more valuable to Eva at this point in the game? Is it a safety without power, which is a borderline idol, or is that extra vote actually a better tool to have in your tool belt, particularly when you already have an immunity idol?
Yeah.
And so I don't blame her for taking the safety without power, because at the end of the day, I can guarantee myself beyond a shadow of a doubt 2 more rounds in this game. We're at 8 right now. After David goes home, we're at 8. I can make my way to 6. And no matter what, I can make my way to 6. That's a pretty powerful thing to have, But that extra vote could really come in handy at 5 when you're trying to get to fire making or have a chance to be in the final 3. Yeah. Being able to turn 5 votes in a game into 6 is like, that's a very powerful tool, and you're a very well insulated player right now within this alliance. So I don't think there's a wrong answer, but I do think there's a really good argument for both.
Yeah. See, I felt like she's so safe. She's got such a huge group of alliance where she's not going anywhere probably ever, right? Like with the power that they have for a long time. I feel like what if they caught wind that somebody's coming after Joe or someone's coming after someone that she wants to save? That extra vote is what could flip the switch if they needed.
Yeah.
I guess, can you use the safety without power for someone else? So
I was wondering that. I'm not sure, because on our season, Saul was like instructed to give it to somebody. Well, this is hers. So I don't know. I think it would be kind of lame if you couldn't, because it's just a piece of paper.
Yeah, I think
so. Hey, this is yours now, Yeah. But also, I don't know the rules around that, and maybe she can't. And if that's the case, then like there's another reason why that extra vote might come more in handy. And the safety without power is so public. That's something where you have to stand up and say, I am playing this. Jeff tells everybody what it is. You get up, you lead in front of everybody. And you also don't get to see how the vote actually ends up going. You just have to trust what people say.
You also don't get to participate.
And you don't get to participate.
You're leaving your alliance kind of hanging when you're really depending on your vote. Something else interesting that I was thinking about with the block of vote is if you do get selected for a journey and you do lose your vote, you can now substitute your extra vote for a shot in the dark if you need it.
Yeah.
Or your vote if you lose it on a journey. So even, so there's so many ways that I think, like logistically and strategically, a block of vote is more powerful than safety without power.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like
that immunity is something special. That immunity is something really special to have. Like, because there's always a scenario of like, I'm going to use this extra vote and this is going to happen, and you're just wrong. And every vote is against you. And it becomes 2 votes. Again, your 2 votes versus everyone else's 5, And it's like, well, what if I didn't even have to deal with that? And I could just leave. So it's like, I get both avenues. And I'm not going to front on Eva for deciding to, risk the extra vote to get the safety without power. Like, yeah, she's in a great place now. She's guaranteed a path to 6 if that's how she wants to play it. And it's like, yeah, I'm not going to hate on that. Like, if I had the same position, I would feel great about where I was at. Yeah. So it was fun. It was really fun. And the best things on Survivor are things that make you think, like, what would I do if I was there? And that was a perfect example of that versus something, which a bit earlier in the game, and it was a proper journey, so it's kind of apples and oranges, but like the dice game that they played. Like that, there's no thinking of the audience. It's just like, I hope my dice turned out good, And so that's why that wasn't very fun to watch. And it's why I don't think they're ever going to do something like that again, because it was like, well, let's watch them roll dice now and see how it goes. Where this one was one you kind of got to participate in as an audience member and be like, well, I would have gone for the idol, or I would have just taken the vote and walked away, or yeah, I would have done what Eva did. And like,
look at us right now.
Literally, exactly, yeah. Like, we're not having this conversation over who rolled what dice the best. And this is what I think they should be going for whenever they do these journeys, whenever they do these advantage mini games, is like, make it something where there's a real decision with real consequences that come from that decision, whether it be positive or negative. So I was a huge fan of this across the board, from the game to the impact on Eva's game to the cinematography, how they shot it. Like, I thought this was a home run sequence for this episode.
I also loved that she didn't lose her vote.
Yeah.
It technically wasn't a journey, but she didn't.
There was nothing really to lose.
Yeah, she had nothing to lose. Why not risk it?
Yeah.
I would have loved to have seen this entire moment on a less insulated player, like Star.
Yeah.
Like,
somebody who needed it. Somebody who really needed it.
Somebody who was a little bit more desperate, just to get a little bit more drama pulled out of it.
I would love Mitch to get it.
Mitch would have been good, yeah. Or like you said, like Star. And like that is something where then it's like, ooh, the game can really be shooken up now. by Eva being the person who got that, it's like, oh, the people in charge are now more in charge. Yeah. Like, okay, like the game.
I'm surprised if we ever see her actually use it. I will be very surprised.
Yeah, exactly. Like, yeah, who's to say she's ever going to even put this into play? Like, you know, where someone like Star or Mitch or Mary could be like, oh, well, I got no other options, but I got this, you know. So it didn't move the needle at all for the power structure of this game. And that has kind of been the story of the season, right? I mean, like, who all have had the idols? Like, say, okay, she was in and out pretty quickly. Kyle was somebody who played an idol, a guy who's been in charge that, you know, is obviously when he played his idol, his name was on the block, but it was just somebody who has found themselves in a powerful position in this game that had an advantage on their side. Eva now has an idol and the safety without power, a powerful player in this game who now has the advantages on their side. Yeah. So it is a bit of this, like, okay, you know, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. And, like, is there ever going to be a moment where the poor people can kind of rise up against the proletariat? I don't know. But that is the one sour part of this, I'll say.
Yeah, part of me is wondering, the little, you know, the pot stir in me is wondering if production is setting this storyline of such an insulated, safe player being so miscalculatedly blindsided.
Yeah.
You had a safety without power, you had an immunity idol, and you still went home. So I'm curious to see if that's kind of this like ticking roller coaster that we're getting, and if it's going to drop into a win or if it's going to drop into a blindside. So we're getting set up for this very tasty moment either way, and I'm very excited to see it. Speaking of tasty moments, we have David versus Goliath, Hercules, you know, in the immunity challenge, battling it out. You guys never did a challenge like this one, did you?
No, and I'm shocked because every challenge they've done this season have all been challenges that we did on our season. They copy and pasted like every single challenge that we did in some way, shape, or form, and this is one that we actually didn't do. So I was pretty surprised by that.
Yeah, this one looks deceivingly difficult. Looking at it, it's like, okay, just hold it up. But it's kind of hard to manage your pressure, especially when you can't directly see what you're pushing against. I don't know if there's any kind of strategy for this type of challenge other than just brute force, which seems to have been the difference here. We saw a few different positions from people. Shaheen tried to squat. We see people, you know, holding their shoulders up, keeping relaxed. So it's really interesting. I want to know, how do you feel? We've talked to this with Sue about this, and she said that she's somebody who gets in the zone and she can kind of mind her own ears and not really worry about things. How do you, when you were out there, feel the people around you, Jeff? How much does that come into play on your focus when you're trying to hold a ball up?
I'd say, for me personally, not a whole lot. Just because I, like, Sue was somebody who was like, I'm the only person out here right now. Like, there's nobody else around me. I just got to do this until I fail or until someone tells me to stop. But it's interesting because David, I think, was often the complete opposite. And if you notice in a lot of the challenges he was in for the individual portion of the game, it was a lot of that. Yeah. It was a lot of, like, talking to the other people, particularly Joe, who he knew.
Supporting them, telling them good job.
Yeah, it was a lot of just, like, constantly looking over and checking on them. And for, like, the bucket challenge, which was pretty much like the closest one that we got to this one, he was doing that a lot, but that wasn't really a focus challenge. That was like a brute force challenge, just like who can hurt the most for the longest. This one was a lot of who can hurt the most for the longest, but was also a focus one because you can have a lot of strength, but if you let it dip for a second, like there's no catching it, you know? Like even Joe was probably a minute away from losing.
Yeah.
And so, like, for the bucket one, like, if you slip, you can catch it and you can crank it back up, you know? You can't move that ball back up the ramp. And that ended up being David's detriment, where you can watch the episode, he's staring at Joe, he's waiting for him to fall, he's looking at Joe, waiting for it to go, and then that's when his slips, and he's so out of focus of what he was doing that he zaps back in, but then it's too much, and he's all frantic, and he steps off, and he's like, well, hell, I was a second away from winning, and then I lost. And I guarantee you, if he was like, Joe doesn't exist, Whenever he falls, he'll fall. I should assume that he's never going to fall. And I'm just going to sit here staring at the ground till I go. He never steps off. But if you can watch it back, he's staring at Joe, and all in his head, you can tell it's Joe. Oh, shit, me. Oh, no, what just happened? Oh, I'm out. And it's like, there's challenges you can't be worrying about what other people are doing, and David seemed to be obsessed with what other people were doing during those challenges, and it led to his downfall in this one, and it happened to be one he really needed to win.
I think it's also has to do with a little bit of too much cockiness.
Sure, yeah. That's probably why he felt that he could throw a lot of focus and attention onto his competitors, because he was like, I'm never going to lose.
Yeah, and even he said it afterwards, this was his to win, and, like, he still, I felt like, instead he didn't really, not that he didn't give Joe credit, but he was more just announcing to everyone, this really was mine. But,
he kind of wrote,
and Jeff's like,
wrote everybody off.
Sure.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with you, Sue. It's interesting to see. It's also really interesting to see, and this is another question I've always wondered, is when you're out there, obviously food is scarce. It's the main topic of conversation on your downtime for the most part, it seems. Were there any rewards during your season that you didn't get, that you did get, that you were like, I need to try twice as hard because a chocolate milkshake sounds so good? Like, was there any moment where you remember being like, I need this, taco reward, or like anything like that?
So I had the longest hunger streak on our season. I went 16 days with zero food whatsoever, just whatever I found like in the dirt is what I had to eat. So like coconuts or like little almonds, or like, not almonds, but you know what I mean. Like, and that was it. But hunger is a weird thing, because like when you wake up in the morning and you're hungry, or like when you get off work and you're hungry, it's because your body is screaming to your brain, like, feed me, feed me, feed me. I know that there's food. Like, there's food in the fridge. There's food on your phone that you can order. Like, there's food on the drive home. Like, feed me, feed me. I know it's there. Go get it. And you reach a certain point, and I would say for me it was like 5 days-ish, like 4 or 5 days, where you're still hungry and you still feel really light, and you're lightheaded when you stand up, and like, you get all skinny, but your body kind of shuts up, and that alert going off in your head, it goes quiet. And then all of a sudden it's not so hard to not eat anymore. It sucks. It's uncomfortable. You don't feel nourished. You don't feel healthy or, whatever, strong, but there's not this internal urgency to go eat and like, and so I had my 16 days, and then on day 17 is when I won the immunity necklace, and because of that, I won the challenge. Or I won the reward. And
you gave us your iconic victory dance.
Yes. Well, shout out to Ray Lewis and the Baltimore Ravens. But part of me was genuinely worried about going and eating on this reward, because I knew that my clock was going to reset, and I knew that I was going to wake up in the morning and my body was going to be like, oh, we're eating again. Oh, it's the morning. We're hungry. Go eat. There's food out there. We just had food, so we know it's out there. Go find it. And sure enough, I had those BLTs. I had that soda. I had those salt and vinegar chips. It was delicious. It was one of the best meals I've ever had in my entire life. And it was just a couple of sandwiches and chips. But when I woke up the next morning, I was like, I'm hungry in a way I haven't been hungry in like 2 weeks again. And we had a reward challenge that day, and it was like to slither through the sand and then go. And it was the first proper like feast reward, where it was like, you have chicken wraps, you have sides, you have dessert, you have wine, you have soda, like, the whole shebang. And that one I wanted to win so bad. And when I opened up my hand to see who was on my team, and I looked to my left, and I saw Kyle and Sam were on a team together, and I was like, oh no. And I looked to my right, and I saw I had Caroline and Andy, and I was like, oh no. I knew I did not stand a chance of winning it. And during that challenge, I was so motivated by how hungry I was again. He says it in the episode when I'm going through the slither portion. Jeff is like, nobody's gotten through this course faster than Gabe, because I flew through that thing. Yeah. And I knew that it was going to be tough, but I was like, if I go last and I do good, maybe I can give us a shot. And as soon as I got to the end of that portion, I got my hands unwrapped, and then everyone was working on getting my ankles undone. And as soon as I stand up is when Sam hits the last shot and they win. So we didn't even get a chance to do the second part. And in that episode, you can see I totally crash out. I'm slamming the ground, and there's like a shot of me where I look like a demon out of hell, where I'm just like so angry. And something they didn't show, which I get why, because it didn't really mean a whole lot. But when we got back to camp, I was so angry at Andy just because he did so bad in that challenge. And I was like, Andy's got to go. I'm sick of it. I've had enough of Andy flipping on people and coming up with all these excuses of why I wanted him to go. But really, it's because I didn't get to have the cookies and cream cake.
You were just hangry.
And like I had this moment where I was like, I got to go lay down. I'm freaking people out right now.
Take a walk.
Yeah, this is not the guy that I've been for 2 weeks out here. Like, I got to go take a chill pill. And I just laid in the hammock for like an hour and a half. And everyone was like, Gabe was kind of spitting fire around camp. And now he's like powered down. Like, he's having a weird day. And I was having a weird day because I wanted food again. And I didn't get to have it. I tried so hard. So, yeah, that like chicken and turkey wrap and cookies and cream cake challenge, I really wanted that one. If you go back,
my stomach's grumbling now. Oh my goodness!
If you go watch that challenge with that context behind it, you'll be like, "Oh, Gabe dug into something deep within himself to do what he did and to still lose." Like, you'll be like, "Yeah, he was angry." So that was in the moment not very fun, but now a very fun memory to look back on.
That's funny. I love.
You find that the cast is eating a lot more than we did?
Yeah, I mean, and I say this as somebody who, like I said, didn't really eat at all. But I feel like their merge challenge or whatever, the merge feast they had, from my understanding, from what you guys told me, it was like a bunch of charcuterie, which is cool, but it was like a bunch of crackers and cheese and little like salami slices. They had wings, they had like fries, they had like a whole thing.
Your season never truly had like a merge feast where everybody sat down with every fixin', wine, beer. Like, there was never truly that like come to Jesus, like breaking bread moment with your season. And it was really interesting to me that now I feel like this season, every single challenge, there is food, where I don't feel like that was always the case. Like, not every challenge always had food, you know?
The only thing I can think is that we had an auction, so that was probably a big part of it too. Is that we know we're going to get to like this halfway point in the game and we're just going to dump food on them all, like a bunch of food all at once. And maybe they're like, we'll take all the food we would have had for the auction and we'll kind of spread it out across these different challenges.
I'm curious if we're going to see one this season. There's still time, but I feel like it might have already happened by now.
Yeah.
Like it should have. But
I mean, it was like a small number to do it with, I feel like.
Yeah, I don't know. I always think 8, like 4 on the top, 4 on the bottom, but it should be 10, 5 and 5.
Yeah.
So I feel like if they were going to do it, it would have to be next week.
Yeah.
Or this upcoming week.
And they'll tease it. Nowadays, they'll tease it. They'll put it in the next time on Survivor. They'll say an auction is happening. And we're dealing with that. So I am skeptical about, and also you got to think from like a logistics perspective, like they're out there 2 weeks after we come home, So, and I think that's why we see a lot of these copy and pasted challenges from 47 to 48, is because it's kind of like we come down with everything for both seasons before anybody gets out there, and we just work through it. We just grind through all these resources we have over the course of these 2 months. So maybe just like, they can't get like a margarita spread and a sweet spread and a big fat burger and a pizza and an apple pie and all this stuff for 2 seasons. It's like we got enough of it to do it once, and that's it. And I think Jeff kind of hinted at that when he was asked about it a couple of years ago.
Yeah, it's interesting to see too, because like we always joke about this, that they reuse challenge pieces and just repaint them.
Yeah,
so, we've always joked about that all season, that we feel like, okay, well, they just made these ones purple now, so I think that there's definitely some truth to that. But, moving into the episode, we have the reward. We get the ham and cheese wraps, some dessert. Not a lot happens at the reward. I feel like it was more joyous and focused on the food than the game. But back at camp, it almost feels like You know, someone just told David that someone ran over his puppy. Mary is like consoling him in this very like personal way.
Very intimate way.
Yeah, it felt very intimate. We see Kyle hinting at it. He didn't want to be messy, but I will.
Yeah.
And it felt like this, like, oh, come here, baby, you know. So it was interesting. I feel like it really just showed David's true colors of being a sore loser is really what it came down to me to. Is it felt different than being upset with yourself for losing and more upset that you didn't win, which, if that makes sense. You know,
I think a lot of it too is that like he did have that challenge won and he deserved to lose, but not because of his physical performance, but because of his mental performance, you know? And I think that, you know, maybe a lot of it, where I think you're right that he was more upset that he didn't win than that he lost. And like, you don't like to see that from anybody, whether they're a big macho guy, whether, you know, they're whoever. But I think that's probably where a lot of the disappointment came from, was that like, it wasn't like I didn't take it as far as I could go, and he just made it like he just had more in the tank than I did. It was like I screwed myself, and that is in any facet of life, whether it's you're at work, whether it's in a relationship, whether it's in a challenge. Like that's always a harder pill to swallow than I just got beat. You know, like they just scored more points than we did. He just put me on the ground. Like that's all it was. But to be like I beat myself, like that's a tough pill to swallow. So I do get that.
Yeah, it like discredited Joe a lot, which I mean, we can all it's very black and white. Joe won because David messed up. Like we can all sit here and say that that's probably true. But to be out on the island and be acting that way, it's
never a good look.
It's never a good look, especially as like the head of the snake in your own alliance. You know, Joe is kind of one of his right-hand men at this point. So to be very openly kind of like demeaning to his performance in the challenge and discreditive, I don't know if that's really a word.
Yeah.
We'll go with it. It was very interesting to me, especially when there's already been thoughts of like dissension within the group.
This could have been an opportunity to be like, hey guys, like Joe, you killed it, man, and like, really, like I'm David, I'm here still for the team, you know. I know that there was some beef before, but like, hey, like even in the thing that's supposed to be my thing, these challenges, like I'm just happy one of us brought it home, you know. That's a very good point I never thought about. You know, that it was a good opportunity for David to be this benevolent leader, even in defeat.
As long as one of us has it, it's good.
Yeah. Instead, kind of like I wanted that. Why I'm pissed I didn't get that. Where it could have been like, hey, if I didn't get it, at least you got it, bro. Like that's awesome, you know. It's a good.
Do that little like that bro thing that guys do, you know, like and just call it a day. You know?
And yes, Sue, to your point, like that would have been like, and that would have landed great with Joe. Yeah. And maybe to your point, Sue, if you come at him with that kind of attitude later in the day when you bring up the like, what the hell happened with the Camilla thing, dude? I thought we were doing that. Maybe it lands a bit better, you know? Yeah, because I'm sure that from Joe's perspective, if the edit, if the chronology of the edit is accurate, I'm sure from Joe's perspective, there's probably a little bit of like, I'm watching this dude mope around all day because I didn't beat him or whatever, and he let himself down. And now, oh, here he comes. What's he got to say? Oh, I went back on my word, bro. I'm over you now. Yeah. It was like man, you know, David kind of wasn't lucky in that challenge, but he came at me afterwards with so much grace and so much appreciation. Like,
maybe he is a good guy. Maybe he was just having a good day, you know?
Yeah, right. And it's like, you know, maybe I did kind of go back on my word. Like, hey, I'm sorry. Like, because I know you're a good guy, and I saw the way you handled losing that challenge to me, and it reinforced my idea of you as a good guy. Like, let me make it up to you. Let's do Camilla tonight. And I'm not saying that would have happened, but you have to imagine he would have set himself up in a better position to come at Joe with that grievance had he not spent all day around camp, blah, 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 and said, hey, Joe, good job, man. I'm happy you got it if I didn't get it. By the way, why didn't we throw Camilla out? Like, you know.
Slide that in.
I guarantee you, though, that they had conversations about that, right? You don't act like that when you lose immunity and not have like Gabe, if something was said to you in that way, you don't think I'd be coming to you being like, what the F? You know, like, why did he say that? Like, you don't think there had to be conversation, which is fueling the fire already in Joe's brain. Like, okay, what's this guy up to? Like, what a dick, type
Well,
thing.
I mean, we had that with TK. Where we lost that challenge, and even when we came in second in the first the first immunity challenge with the boats, when we came in second, and when we got back to camp, TK was still like, well, next time we got to get first. We got to get first. And then I was kind of like, yeah, I mean, kind of in this part of the game, like second is as good as first. Like as long as no one's getting voted out, like who really cares, And he was like, no. We're getting first next time. Yeah. And it was like, all right, well, it's not.
Right idea, wrong execution.
And then when we go to the next challenge and we lose, and TK has a whole crash out on the mat, and like calls everybody losers, like exactly what Sue was saying, everybody was walking around the camp that they do. What the hell was that? Like, why did he say all that? And so, yes, Sue, I think you make a great point. Just that, like, what you say carries outside of conversations that you're in. Conversations about you that you're not a part of, even if it's not strategic.
Someone that everybody likes, right? He sort of targeted Tiana a little bit, whatever it was, just like David did. That your people that like you are going to be like, that's bullshit. Like you, we're trying to, as hard as we possibly can.
Exactly.
Right. So.
And like it's tough because so many people who watch at home have the convenience of only looking at it from a strategic perspective, right? Only thinking about like, this is a board game and how do I get to the end the fastest and the best, most efficient way so that I can win. And this is something I talk about a lot, that like so many votes are steered just by quality of life. Just by like, I can't deal with this person anymore on the human level. Like, despite how good for my game it might be to keep them as a shield, despite how good it might be for my game because I think they'll vote with me, it's like I am dreading waking up every day and having to have a conversation with this person, and that's all I need to vote them out.
Yeah.
When you're at home, you're like, well, that's a dumb reason. Like, you're not playing right. But when you're out there, it's the best reason. When we got to wake up that first day and Rome wasn't on the island anymore, it was like there was a ceasefire for a day just to be like, oh my God, guys, like we're fucking done with that, And then even TK, who outside of the game, I have a very positive relationship with, and I think he's a great guy. I just don't think that he handled a lot of the stresses of Survivor very well. When we voted out TK the next day, it was like, oh, we have some peace, we have some quiet, like, thank God.
Good, right? Like, we just felt like we were just normal people again.
Yes. And it was like, that's a great way to put it. Because when TK was out there, it felt like we were constantly in like this game. And it was like, he was somebody who I think, and there are many people throughout the history of Survivor, and even more people who have never played Survivor that would be like this. I think that this is like the normal human reaction to doing something that we did. But he was always kind of in this like, we're on Survivor, guys. This is crazy, isn't it? Like, this is crazy. We're on Survivor. And there was never any natural conversation when TK was around, And then once he left, it was like, oh, we can all kind of just like be people. Like, we went to the challenge, we won, or we came in second, we're not going to tribal. Like, we can all just talk about home and chill. We're not having these very performative conversations with each other. And that was something that he brought to the table. And I don't think that is something that like David brought to the table, but it is just this more general quality of life influencing how you want to vote. And it's like, this guy, David, is like really calling shots on people. He's calling people out. Like, I didn't really like the way he came at Kyle. He's calling out my integrity. Like, he's all mopey and like this kind of storm cloud around camp because he lost the challenge. It's like, how nice would it be if we just didn't have to deal with any of that, And
then it's so simple as, bitch, you're just annoying.
You're just annoying. Yeah, exactly. And kind of loop it back to our point earlier about like the macro view of the game versus the micro view of the game. Another reason why Kyle had such a good micro view of Joe is he goes up to Joe and he's like, the way David came after me really triggered me because of things that have happened in my past. So now Joe is also thinking, this guy who he really seems to like on a personal level in Kyle, like, I don't want to see my homeboy going through it because of what somebody else is doing. So again, not even for his own quality of life, but for his friend's quality of life, like, I know Kyle will be happier if this guy isn't here anymore, and that will make me happy because Kyle's happy because I love Kyle, you know? Like, I know TK and Sue really didn't get along out there for, like, the 3 or 4 days that he was out there, and, like, you know, like, I kind of aired out my grievances of TK as a player when we were there, but I also knew that, like, I really like Sue a lot. I don't like seeing Sue be annoyed. I don't like seeing Sue being sad. So if I can get TK out of the game, then Sue becomes a much better person for me to be around because it's not me just trying to cheer her up or distract her all the time because TK's got her worked up over whatever silly thing he said. Like, she's just going to be in a better mood over the course of our time here. And that's a really strong motivator to want to get somebody out. So, like, while there was a lot of strategic reason for getting David out, I think this was more of a social thing. I think this was like, he's a storm cloud around Cam because he lost this challenge. He came after Kyle really hard. Kyle explained that he really didn't appreciate that. Now he's coming after Joe really hard. It's like, this dude is kind of becoming a bit of a hand grenade, you know? And, like, let's just keep it
on top was just that he's Hercules, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And so like, I look at this vote as something that was much more socially driven than strategically driven. Because, again, like we already said, strategically, David was the only one who was right. David had the strategy right, but he didn't have the social right. And again, it's just like this balancing act that is Survivor of, like, you got to have all those things. And the best players who play this game are the ones that understand the macro of everything that's going on with the remaining players of the game as a unit, as a cast, as a game, but also have the micro down packed on every. So, like, Boston Rob in his early days is a great example of this, where he was able to read the game super well of how everybody was operating as a unit, but when he needed to have those individual conversations, he could shoot them that Boston Rob charm and smile and get them to do whatever he needed them to do. You know, Tony is a good example of that as well. Like, Parvati is a great example. Sari is an amazing example of that. And it's why she is, like, the most fascinating non-winner. It's like, how have you not found your way to the end yet? Or how have you not found your way to the end?
She'll be added to the Hall of Fame soon.
Yeah.
We'll see. But, like, those great players are the people who would have had David's read on the current state of season 48 and had Kyle's approach to Joe when he needed to get that vote on his side to implement that view that he had on the game. The very best players of Survivor are people who can do both. Many players can do one and not the other. Even more players can't do either. And that pantheon of the best are the people who can do both. David was not one of those people, as we clearly saw.
Yeah, because what might work on Sue might not work on Gabe. What might work on me might not work on, you know, Sarah Lee, whatever. So it's interesting to see that even though Kyle's strategic reasoning was not maybe as sound, if they really wanted to take this Muscle Man alliance to the end, but the way that he presented his reasoning was more impactful. And
exactly.
He also
exactly
on board, right? He already kept telling him he's coming after you. He's bringing up your name. So he played a lot more people and probably had many more conversations than what we even saw too. Yeah. So I think he had the whole group. He was able to rally everybody as well, on top of David digging his own grave, you know.
A common enemy is very, very powerful on Survivor. Yeah. You choose to pull, you know, ignite that fuse is also kind of the telling of a good player. Knowing when to light that match to kind of blow up that common enemy is very, very good. We saw a lot of the attorney come out in Kyle. We saw him playing to the jury a little bit here, so to speak. So I really am looking forward to hopefully getting a final 3 kind of brawl with Kyle in it. I'm so excited to see him continue to kind of flourish in the game. Speaking of this kind of jury management and these seeds being planted, as we saw, how are we feeling about this montage of Shaheen planting these seeds, moving through the game, claiming that these subtle conversations have now bloomed into the fruits of David's elimination? How do we feel? Do we think he's really planting these seeds and fertilizing them as well as he's saying, or is this more grandiose?
I look at Shawkeen as somebody who I think has a good read on the game. I think he's in a good place. I think that he is somebody who is really good in those one-on-one conversations. I think people like Shawkeen out there. The main flaw I see in his game is who is Shawkeen's number one, right? Like, who does he have a clear-cut number one? Camilla has Kyle. Joe has Eva. Mary had David. Like, who is Shawkeen's? And it's really
Camilla's his.
right, yeah. So it's clear that he doesn't even know who his number one is, you know? Yeah. And it's very difficult to make it to the end of a Survivor game without an out and out number one. Because those numbers are going to dwindle and they're going to keep dwindling. And eventually you're going to get to the point where it's like, I need somebody who has very openly, at least to me, been my ride or die. Yeah. And if he gets down to any kind of permutation between Kyle, Camilla, Joe, Eva, he's going to be the one left on the outs. So I really like Shawkeen's chances of making it to like the final 6, maybe even the final 5. But I don't see anybody being like, I want to bring you to the end. Yeah. Because he is this very good orator. He's somebody who doesn't seem to have, while he doesn't have a, you know, like me and Sue type relationship with any one person, it doesn't seem like anybody's like, I hate Shawkeen. It seems like he's somebody that everybody kind of likes. I don't think anybody would mind seeing him win in the end.
I don't think he's really like majorly pissed anybody off.
Exactly. So I don't think that he's somebody that people are looking at as somebody that is in their finale plans. Yeah. And like
nobody's bringing him on that last seat in the lifeboat.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a tough place to be. And you're kind of getting to the point now where like those candidates for who can be my number one, they're very few and far in between now. And you're going up against people who have been each other's number one since day one. Joe and Eva have been together since the beginning. Kyle and Camilla have been together since the beginning. And you have to overcome that with somebody who you're starting with at the final 8 and being like, let's go to the end together. Even if you guys would mean it, it's never going to be as strong as a bond as any of the other 4 have. So I see Shawkeen's path to the proper end game, but I don't see his path to the finale. He doesn't have that out and out number one who will step up to protect him and keep him in the game and will actively want to sit next to him in the end because it is such a statement of victory. Even if Joe doesn't think he can beat Eva, it is a statement of victory that my number one is sitting next to me in the finale and you got to choose between us. It is a big statement of victory for Kyle to sit at the end with Camilla or vice versa and say, we both made it here together and now you have to choose one of us. No one's looking at Shawkeen being like, me sitting next to Shawkeen is a statement of how good my game was, yeah. You know? So yeah, I think he's an interesting player. I think he's played a good game, but I think that, you know, maybe his number one was going to be Thomas with the California girls and that got blown up too late and then he didn't have anywhere else to go. But I don't see his way to sitting in the final 3. I don't think it exists right now.
Yeah. I don't think so.
Sue definitely does not.
No, I don't think so.
So we move into tribal council, and I just have to say I'm disappointed. So far this season, we have not had any jury member serves. We have not had anybody come out and just absolutely serve it to us. We got
time. It's only been 2.
I know.
Which granted, our 2 were like the serviest serves of all time. Sierra and Soul was like, you know. So yeah, that is true.
We were so spoiled by this time last season with Sierra's iconic entrances, Soul in his vest by the next episode. It was just, I'm just expecting these moments of like facial expressions, looks. You know, you're clean now. Everybody on this season, I will say too, still looks extremely clean.
Hey.
Sensitive. Okay, watch yourself.
Set the bar really low.
Yeah, right.
I know. But I don't know. There's something about, like, I feel like we'll randomly see new clothes, like brand new. Joe was like wearing a button down that I've never seen before. Like, it's really weird. They still seem very.
They did.
Yeah, like he looked. I was like, damn. You know, like, so. It's interesting to me that I feel like they still don't really look dirty, you know?
Yeah.
Or maybe just my perspective is skewed because we have one of the dirtiest history on the podcast. Hey. So, you know, it's just interesting to see. But that's what I noticed. We haven't had any jury serves yet. I was looking forward to Chrissy coming out and, you know, giving us Chrissy tea, but she didn't, unfortunately.
Nothing. Yeah.
But were there any moments this tribal council that really stood out to you that were kind of like, oh, I know I have one particularly, but I want to see if you guys share the same opinion.
My favorite one was Star, when she mimicked, or, you know, what Camille was saying. I was cracking up. That girl, we need more of her. Like,
I agree. Yeah.
They're just editing her out, and she's so entertaining.
Oh my God, I love her.
Oh my God, that was one of the best things. And and even for Camille to be like, she said it better. Like it was so perfect.
Her words, not mine, but that, you know.
Star, no pun intended, has, I think, been like such an underutilized star of the season. Where every time she comes up, it's like Kramer on Seinfeld, just like busted through the door, and it's like, what is going to come out of this person's mouth? And it's always like in like this very positive way too. It's not like Say, where you were wondering a lot of like, what's this person going to say?
Yeah.
Because it was like, who are they going to piss off this time? Star, it's like, are they going to make everybody crack up? Are they going to console somebody? Like, are they going to tell a story from home that's like super funny in a confessional? Like, what is it going to be from Star next? And it's always from a positive place. It's never Star picking fights with people. It's never Star throwing shade. And that's a very difficult thing to do on these reality TV shows, because people tune in because they want to see the fights. They want to see somebody who's really messy. They want to see a Say who is going to go out and, you know, like call people names, or, poke and prod at people or whatever. And so to have somebody shine through the way that Star does, through a very positive light, is like very refreshing to me. And I do hope that we get to see more of her. I'm disappointed at the lack of her that we've seen over the course of this season. But yeah, that was obviously the big moment. Looking at it from
they're gearing up for her end game.
I hope so.
Mary was edited out a lot too, and I always felt like she
was
Mary.
Oh yeah. And early on in the season, she was great. I mean, she was awesome. She was a great narrator. She was a great storyteller. She had a rivalry with Say, where she was kind of the good guy in that rivalry and owned that role very well. And then she was somebody else who I thought was this personality that leapt off the screen that's kind of disappeared. And I think a lot of people are left waiting like, okay, no offense to the guy, but like Joe has been like kind of boring. Like, can we get somebody with some spunk back on the show? Eva's been kind of boring. Like, can we get someone back with some spunk here? And all the spunky people are kind of falling to the wayside. And
times, Nick, right? Like we've said, not that it's boring, but I mean, it's always entertaining. But like, I don't know, like
it doesn't have any spice. It's like I'm eating a well-cooked fillet, but it's not seasoned. It's like, where's this? Yeah, It
feels like this season, the producers have wanted every single episode to be this heartfelt kind of like cathartic release for the viewers. There's no kind of like ups and downs of this season. We've had a lot of big emotional moments. Even this episode, we got a lot of Kyle's past about his incarceration as a young man, working through that. We had this very big, interpersonal moment with Kyle. We've had moments with Eva. We've had moments with Joe. So there's something about this season that feels like we're supposed to be emotional about the players.
Yeah.
Like they're forcing it onto us. Whereas last season, there was a lot of emotional moments for things that weren't necessarily deemed this is going to make somebody cry.
Yeah.
I feel like Survivor's really pushing these personal connections in a way that is forcing the dial in like the emotional spectrum, because there's a whole deleted scene that was posted on their social media of Star going around and investigating everybody's final twos, asking them.
Saw that, yeah.
Yeah, she was asking them, well, who's in your final three? And she was like, and I know if they say nobody, that I'm not in their plans and they got to get gone, so she is not only very entertaining to watch, but she's also moving storylines.
Yeah.
I don't understand why they're not utilizing her, kind of to the same point as Mary, where she has been kind of the puppeteer of David, and we didn't hear any of her strategic reasoning for wanting Camilla out.
Yeah.
I don't really understand their point of view this season with the editing. Last season, it was more obvious that we had the Rome moment to kind of like undercut him a little bit. And we had kind of Rachel was kind of the brains behind the operation, that we got this like you didn't see me coming storyline. So there's like a lot of one-off moments.
Yeah.
Moments. So I'm just interested to see how they're going to tie it together and kind of make it a little bit more spicy.
Yeah, and I think that I heard coming out of our season that like production was very, very high on 48. And a trend that I noticed is that when they are really into a season as they're watching it. Another great example of this is Worlds Apart when Mike Holloway won. And like that was like everybody, even the casual fans was like everyone saying this is like the best season ever from like all the crew that was out there. I think that this is just a theory that when they have that sentiment as they did with 48, they don't feel like they have to edit as much or storytell, and it's kind of like if we just show them what happened, like that will be enough, and so I think with 47 it was like their bar was a bit higher because they weren't totally sure how it was going to land with people, and we ended up having a really captivating story just plainly that was met with really high quality, really high effort editing, and you get like this awesome season. And 48, I kind of just, my own interpretation, my own perception is that they were kind of like, let's just show them what happened and everyone will be like, oh my God. And they may have taken a step back in like their editing or just like the effort they put into editing it. And I think it's kind of showing through because who won 47, particularly once we got to this point in the game, felt left out of the edit. Like, I mean, even Caroline, who didn't really get like a whole lot of screen time, it was still clear to everybody watching what her vision was, what her motivations were, what the alliances were, where she came from in the beginning of the game, where she's hoping to go at the end of the game. Like everybody, Genevieve, Andy, me, Sue, Caroline, Sam, Rachel, like all of these people had very well developed, very fleshed out, very put on display stories for everybody. And I'm sat at home now wondering, who does Star even talk to?
What does she do all day? Like, where is she?
Are they even talking to people, or are they just sitting at camp until it's time to go to a challenge and then coming home and then waiting for tribal? And I know that that's not what's happening. And to your point, Nick, of the deleted scene, we know that's not what's happening. Yeah. But it's like the edit isn't really suggesting anything otherwise. And like 47 was something that did not have that problem. Everybody's motivations, even the people who didn't go on to win or sit in the final 3 seats, it was still very clear who they were, what they were trying to do, and where their place was in the game. And now we have like 2, maybe 3 people, if you count Mary, like 2.5, who it's like, what are they even doing out there? And I know from being a player, and I'm sure Nick, as being a longtime fan and talking to a lot of players, that like these people are doing stuff. And the deleted scene of Star is proof of that she's doing stuff. I'm sure Mitch is doing a lot of stuff, but that's all being left in the editing room floor. And I don't get that. I don't understand it. I feel like they're not only robbing the individuals of their experience being put on display, but they're robbing us of an audience of really interesting, captivating contestants that just are being completely left out for it to be made clear that the majority alliance is the majority alliance. It's like
even Mitch, who dominated a large majority of the editing in the beginning of the season, has now felt like, okay, his story has happened.
Like a total passenger, yeah.
Where it's just frustrating because you can tell by the editing who production is kind of rallying behind.
Sure.
And it's unfair to the players that are out there who don't know that in the moment. Nobody knows when it's being filmed that, their edit might be the class clown that gets, made fun of by editing, or they might be the villain, or this, that, or the other. So it feels almost unfair. I don't know anything about Star other than that she's funny and that she's pretty athletic and, a little goofy. I don't know about her home life. I don't know if she has siblings. I don't know anything about her. Whereas with Eva, I know she grew up with brothers. She played hockey. She, has gone through a lot with her autism diagnosis. She grew up, doing skating and snowboarding, and she's kind of a tomboy. Like, I know all these little bits and bobs about Eva, about Joe.
Yeah.
I know Joe's kids' names.
Yeah.
I don't even know where Star is from.
Yeah.
What she does for a living. I could not tell you her job.
I think that's something that like is robbing us of, as an audience, of like, these people who are very captivating and were clearly put on the show for a reason. They went through months of casting to be out there. Clearly the production team thought that they were deserving and would jump off the screen. And the thing that is the most striking to me is that because sometimes you do get people that get out there and they just completely shut down and they're duds, But something that strikes me is that Star, when given that spotlight, has really popped. And it's like, you don't know who's going to pop and who's not when you're putting the show together. But it's like, how could you not see what you guys had? And how could you, even if she gets voted out next week, like, how could you not, build it up so that, like, if Star were to go home next week, I, having met her personally a couple times and just, like, being deep in this community, like, would be devastated, because I want to see more of her. I wanted to go deeper. But as, like, a casual fan, just a viewer, it would mean nothing to me.
Yeah,
like, that person's gone. Well, what were they even doing here in the first place? And the goal, in my opinion, of the editors and the storytellers is that every time somebody goes home, it should hit some kind of string on you, whether it's sadness, whether it's happiness that you don't have to watch them anymore and you saw their downfall, whether it's confliction, you don't know if you liked them or not, whether it's shock, I thought they were going to win and now they're gone. Like, it should make you feel something. And I think when Chrissy went home, it was like, well, who, okay, I guess they're gone. When Star goes home, it's not going to hit very hard for anybody, I don't think, unless, it changes or they're setting her up to go make a run to the end, which would be pretty cool.
I really hope that we're getting this like sleeper edit and she's turning it up, because Sue and I have both said a few times with a few different eliminations this season where we were like, well, they're gone.
Yeah.
And Survivor does Survivor so well with the storytelling. They are so good at captivating people with people's stories who I've never met. Like, why should I care about this guy Mitch? But they give you a reason to. They pull you in with these things that feel relatable, but also so distant that you can't understand how somebody could have gone through that and still be so positive.
Yeah.
It's interesting to me. It almost feels like production didn't think that we as viewers would root for Star.
Yeah.
There just feels like a lot of hand forcing with the perspective of how we are supposed to feel as the viewer. We're supposed to love this or hate this big macho alliance. We're supposed to not really care about the people on the outside because there's no underdog edit. There's not even an underdog edit happening.
Yeah.
Like, I know Mitch and Star are talking. I know that Mitch and Shaheen and Camilla are all having these side conversations, but we're finding out that David loves milk.
Yeah.
Over and over.
If this was like a pattern, then I would be like, well, this is just how the show is, But the fact that as recently as 47, like, we had this huge cast of characters where everybody was very fleshed out. It's like, why did you pull back on that going into this season? And again, it kind of goes back to this working theory I have of, I think they loved so much of what they saw in person that they were like, let's just show it, let's, almost documentary style, let's just show it.
Keep it raw, untouched.
What I found really interesting from Tribal was the original statement by Camilla, excuse me, of her being like, if I go to the jury, I'm not going to vote for you to win because I don't like the way you play the game. Well, I have no issue with that sentiment. That's part of the game. I am somebody who never liked that as like a strategy card of being like, if you vote me out, then you'll not have my jury vote. Not that I think it's outside the bounds of the game. You're totally within your rights to do that. But it does feel kind of like sore loserish.
It's like breaking the fourth wall, like, the jury is there, you're doing your jury management, but you're not really supposed to like throw it in people's faces.
Yeah, and I also think it's just a bit of like being a bit of a sore loser. I think that there's a bit of like, like, Well, okay, you beat me, but I'm not going to say you won. Like, it's kind of this little kid mentality that I never appreciated in Survivor. And again, if you want to do that, like, I don't think you're stepping outside the bounds of the game. I think you're totally free to do that. My response, if somebody ever told me that, would always be like, there's 7 other votes from the jury. You know, like, I got 7 more people to work with. You're one I don't have. Okay, fine. I was never going to get everybody anyway. So for Camille to throw that out, like, very brazenly, and I guess Star kind of, like, coming out and saying it didn't really help. But
that's where I disagree. I think it did. In this moment, while it's kind of distasteful, I agree with you, to bring up the jury to somebody, I do feel like in this moment, it might have been Camilla's last effort to show publicly, I am not tied to these people.
Yeah.
An open book. If you are playing with not even integrity, if you are playing the game, I want to play with you. I will vote for you, and I'm all about it. So I feel like it almost, in a way, opened up. It could have opened up more relationships for
doors for her. Yeah.
Camilla.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, she's playing. I thought she was just kind of be goated. You know, maybe now I'm going to look to Camilla and be like, you know what? I really wasn't vibing with David either. Maybe we have more in common than we think. So yeah. I think it could help her, especially because she didn't really say it. You know, like Star
was the one who said it. Yeah.
You know, so it's funny. Star has this way of like, she could literally tell somebody, you know, your mama's ugly and I hate you, and everybody would still laugh.
Yeah, right.
This delivery method that like ends everything with flowers. Like, it's so interesting to watch.
It is. It really, really is. But those were the only 2 moments from Tribal that really stuck out to me as big ones.
Yeah. Sue, any for you?
No, that was it. The star.
Yeah, Sue said the Star one earlier.
Yeah. So with Tribal, you know, comes this nothing of a torch. We do see that the mighty statue has fallen in David, and it was a very bright burn, I think. He got a lot of the edit in the beginning of the season. We saw a lot of his own self-awareness of his, like, douchebaggery, I always called it.
Yeah.
It was interesting to see his character development. We saw that he is a little bit more human behind all of the biceps. And it was nice to kind of learn a little bit about him. But I think, unfortunately, in the end, his ego was his downfall.
Yeah.
He was very dynamic to watch. The only thing I didn't love about this moment was this, like, strongman exit. It was very, like, you know.
Really, I thought it was, like, devastation. I thought he was like, I can't, because I don't think he saw it coming. And he was somebody who, like, was not a fan. Like, I mean, he tells the story a lot because it's funny. Like, so I don't think he'll mind me telling it here. Like, the way he initially applied to be on the show was emailing Jeff Probst at CBS.com. Like, that's how little of a fan he was of the show. And then in the middle of his casting, he learned about the challenge. And he was like, well, wait, I should be on that show. Like, wait, hold on. They were like, well, no. Like, we want you to be on Survivor. So, like, he is somebody who was, like, here exclusively to go win $1 million, which is very old school of him, you know, which is something that a lot of people say they want back in the game. And he was that. So when I think he got voted off, I think it was like, I'm so hurt and so devastated that I can't do anything but just get up and walk. Like, that's how I interpreted it, at least. Like, he was somebody who was, like, very, very broken down in that moment and was like, I don't even know what just happened. All I know is I feel really bad right now. And I just got to, like, that's how I took it.
Weren't you waiting for him to say something? I felt like it was like this pregnancy pause. They filming him, and he wasn't moving, and I'm just like, he's gonna be saying something, and he did.
And nothing. Yeah, for sure. Sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, that was it. I was just saying.
But I really did appreciate his, like, final words in his last confessional, where he was like, we're all going to be heroic one day, and then we'll all turn around and be villainous the next day. Like, we're all just human. And while it is just, like, you know, his throwaway last words, I do think that's, you know, very emblematic of, like, what Survivor's all about. And I think that nowadays, with the way that social media works, with, like, just the labels that can get thrown on people, particularly online, that we kind of forget that, like, nobody who is shown to be a hero was always heroic out there. Nobody who's shown to be a villain was always a villain out there, with a few exceptions. Like, this is a game of people that are forced to face and deal with the full spectrum of themselves and the full spectrum of the people that they're playing with. People at their best when they win an immunity necklace or when they get their first reward in a while, and people at their lowest when they're really hungry and really homesick and really irritable. And like, I think that David was a good, no pun intended again, torchbearer for that, where he was this guy who came out of the gate, with like a lot of optimism and kind of had this underdog story of like, yeah, I'm this big, good looking guy, but like I still live with my dad, and like my girlfriend is always kind of on me, and might break up with me if I don't win this thing. And then he kind of just did. And then she did break up with him, and he had to break up with him because he didn't win. That he's very happy with.
But do you believe that?
That his girlfriend broke up with him?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
He just said it in his exit interview. They talked about it
and then he has a new lady in his life now that he's very happy with. So I'm with him. But he is somebody who I think was like a good showcase for the highs and low of Survivor. And I just like, you'll never get through to the people online who just like to be trolls and just like to hate for the sake of hating. Like, but I hope that people who kind of all on the fence like do look at somebody like David and they're like, yeah, like people go through every spectrum of emotion that you can have when you're playing this game, and to not so harshly throw these labels on people that folks love to and just throw hate at them because it's fun or because it makes them feel good or whatever it may be. And it's very easy behind the screen, and like most of them are probably kids anyway that don't even know what they're doing. But I just think that David's final words were very emblematic of his game of being this heroic figure and being an underdog in life and coming out here to win $1 million and turn his life around, to crashing out and turning on his closest allies and being very aggressive and very vindictive against the people who supported him the most out there. And it's like, that is a complete game of Survivor, like he went through all of it. Yeah. And his final words, I think, really showed that like, I was a hero one day, I was a villain the next, and everybody who played this game with me can say the same exact thing and be honest about it. Like, and so that I really appreciated.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, Sue, unless you have anything about David that you would like to add, that feels like a very nice way to wrap up this episode. That was very well kind of summarized. I think that is a great message to take away from this episode. Don't be a troll. It's not that serious. It's Survivor. But Sue, anything else?
No, yeah. As we all know, Joe's my favorite, but I did like David, and I do like David. I think, you root for everyone, and no one knows what it's like to be out there unless you've literally been out there. And yeah, maybe he was a little bit too cocky and a little bit too full of himself, and was his downfall. I think, but I'm sure him looking back now, he's probably got a million things. He's like, what he would have done differently.
Yeah.
Like we all do. Oh, sorry, he scared me. But I don't know. Yeah, I liked him, but it was definitely time to go. I felt like the writing was on the wall.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
From the challenge down to Joe in the hammock, that was it. I felt like in my brain, I'm like, he's going home.
Yeah.
Like, you don't mess with Joe.
Yeah. Joe, like you said, he's in that power broker role, and I think that Joe's power broke David's game.
Yeah, there you go.
So, my God, I just called you David. Gabe, one last question. Who is going to win Survivor 48?
It's very tough to say because I think, as we said at the beginning of the episode, there's a lot of candidates that are like proper candidates. I think the person in the best position right now is probably Kyle. I think that he has managed to protect this relationship with Camilla very well. I think he has done so without putting himself outside of the majority alliance that he's been a big player in. And I don't think he quite has the target on his back that I think some of the other candidates do, like Joe, because of this open relationship, this open alliance that he has with Eva, or Eva, who has a pocket full of advantages that is very appetizing to blindside. So if Kyle were to not make it to the end, I think that Joe or Eva could have a really good chance of winning. Those are probably my three front runners right now. I think most people would probably agree with that assessment.
Yeah.
I think Camilla has a very good path to the end, but I think it's one that has to involve cutting Kyle before she gets there. I don't think she can sit with Kyle and beat him, but I think if she were to cut Kyle and sit at the end, she would be in a very good position to win. So that's kind of my pool of winners right now. Joe, Eva, Kyle, Camilla, obviously the two strongest duos in the game. But if I had to pick one out of all of them, I'd say Kyle finds himself in a pretty good spot right now, which could change next week. We'll see.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think if Camilla gets to the end, she has to do something big, either cut Kyle or take the head off this Joe and Eva snake and kind of run an underdog alliance to the end. So it'll be interesting to see. I am interested to find out. Gabe, thank you so much for joining us today.
This is awesome.
Are very, very grateful. Thank you for being a viewer. You are welcome back to the virtual couch anytime. Awesome. And we always tell everybody next time you're in Philly, we owe you a drink. Josh sends his love. He was one of your biggest fans, is one of your biggest fans.
Yeah.
47. He told me to tell you that.
Okay.
And yeah, just as always, thank you so much. Sue, as always, we love you. We'll see you next week. Thank you so much. And everybody, that has been your reality check for Survivor 48, episode 9. We're a few away from that final tribal. So be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Turn on the notification bell so you know when we are talking about your favorite shows. And Gabe, who do you want to come on the pod next? Drop a name.
Ooh, well, I don't know who you guys have had on quite yet. I got to put a 47 person on, obviously. You guys have had Soul on, right?
Soul and Sue are our two so far.
Okay. She'll never do it because she doesn't like being in the spotlight. Get Genevieve on here.
Oh my God, that's my dream.
It's about time we got Genevieve on one of these shows.
Gabe wants her on.
That is my
Everybody's Sam's done his shows. I've done mine. Saul's done his. Andy's done his. Rachel's done hers. Even Rogue's done his. We need to get Genevieve out there. We need to get her back in the spotlight as much as she hates it.
All right, we will work on it. Everybody down below, tag Genevieve. I don't even think she's on social media, right?
She's not. That's what I'm saying. Tag her husband. Tag her husband, Mark. He's Twitter at least.
She's the white whale. She's the reality check white whale, everybody. But who knows? Maybe next week we'll see you with Genevieve. But if not, as always, thanks for tuning in, and we will see you next week. Bye.
Bye.